Welcome to Rejuvi 45 and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We are so glad you're here. And if you're here because you've heard this phrase called modern leadership and you're curious and or it has already inspired you and your teams of people. Modern leadership is simply the belief that we can be compassionate human leaders at the same time as we are fierce business leaders. And today we're here to talk about a topic called Make It Quick. My name is Regina Hepp, and I am the president of Rejuvi. And today I am joined by
Emily Heron.
Emily. Oh my goodness, it's so good to see you.
Reg, it's been a long time. I'm so excited to spend a few minutes with you. I'm looking forward to chatting about leadership. You and I go way back, so I'm really looking forward to our time together.
We do go way back. In fact, we were talking about that in planning for today's session, and I think we decided we have been together for about 8 to 10 years. That's a lot of that's a good chunk of time
It
to
is. It
have
is.
met. Yeah.
Yes, we were just chatting that my kids were very little when we first met, and now my oldest is going to be 13 tomorrow. So
And you're
time
having
is
teen and
just flying by.
you're having teenage sleepovers.
Can't even handle it. Nope, can't even handle it.
We've certainly planned the session today, but and so as we kind of talk through some things, a lot of my favorite memories of you and the way that I would describe you as a leader will come up. But I will have to say, um, when I drive by a caribou coffee, I think of you. How many glasses of that passion fruit iced tea did we have at that caribou on the corner of something and something, where we talked and had fantastic conversations about leaders, becoming a really, really fantastic one, women in leadership. We solved a lot of problems over those cups of iced tea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I still love my caribou. So yeah, we'll have to do that again sometime soon.
We will. For folks who are joining us today, I'm not new to you. You see me here pretty much kind of every week, but Emily Heron is new to you. And one of the things that I would really encourage you to do is to check her out on LinkedIn, connect with her, kind of follow her. She is the very definition of a modern leader. She's just this really good human being, and at the same time, it's a really smart, fierce business leader. And it's one of the reasons why we wanted to have her here for this topic called Make It Quick. And the whole idea about Make It Quick is that um, there are times when we think about working with our teams and planning and kind of putting together our agenda. And we think about it taking kind of months of planning. And I think as we talk to Emily today, we're going to start to take a look at it. Doesn't have to mean months of planning. It can be weeks of planning and then start days of execution. Like you can get going on things kind of really quickly. So we're excited to talk to Emily about her experience with that and making it quick. So Emily, before we get into the topics about business planning or kind of setting your agenda as a team, the responsibility of the leader and making all that happen, I think it'd be great for you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your background.
Awesome. So as we covered, I am a mom of two, almost a teenager. So that is part of my daily life, and definitely a lot of what I do in my free time is following them around. They're both very active kids, and so that is a good chunk of my time. When I am at work, I have about 20 years of professional experience. I've always been in the financial industry in some shape or form. The last 18 years, I've been fortunate enough to be a director and a leader within a large agricultural company. Over those 18 years, I've had the fortune of working in a variety of different groups, including competitive intelligence, mergers and acquisitions. I've worked with the R&D team, the commercial team. And so I've just had the opportunity to work with small teams that I'm working in being the direct leader and having that direct relationship. But I've also had the opportunity to be that influential leader. So working with leadership or with peers or people who are even above me in the hierarchy, and really being that influential leader and helping set the strategic direction and think about how we're going to evolve as a company.
Yeah, I like your phrase, kind of influential leader. There's a lot of people who review our content who don't have these, 18 to kind of 20 years of experience. And one of the things that when they listen to you and kind of watch you, they talk about your breadth of experience. It's not just in one particular vertical, but it's been in a number of different functions, kind of more horizontally across the organization. Um, was that by plan? How did that come to be, and what do you see the value of that being as an influential leader?
Yeah, I would say it was not by plan. I would love to say that I am that person that has their career plan all dotted out and everything went exactly as planned. First of all, I haven't met that person yet, but also it's just in my own way. I've always taken every role as an opportunity to learn. I've used that curiosity mindset to continue to think about the next thing and the next and always been curious about the other side of the process. So, what
Mhm.
is this end-to-end piece? What am I supplying or providing, and where does that go, and what do they do with it? And I think that's just really led me to a lot of different pieces of our organization over time. And I would also say I've been very fortunate to work on cross-functional teams. So when you get that opportunity to work on projects and be in a cross-functional situation, it's so much more natural to find that next job opportunity with somebody you already have a rapport with, you've already worked on a project with, and maybe you even have a little background about what they bring to the table. And that curiosity kind of leads you to the next spot. I would say one of the things that I find very beneficial about having that diverse background is the appreciation of where people are coming from. I find so often that when we're working on a collaborative project together, everybody has their own piece they're trying to get out of it. And unless you understand what they're going to do with it or why they are bringing that opinion or that piece of information to the project, I don't think you have a good understanding of how you can make the project as effective as possible.
Mhm.
So being able to see different parts of the organization has definitely helped me, you know, draw the line between all the different dots.
Mhm. Have you noticed? I know that these are not necessarily questions that we plan, but I think it's just kind of so organic, and I think a lot of people, a lot of aspiring leaders, a lot of leaders with who are building their tenure in their space will get a lot from this. But it sounds like your own sense of curiosity started to drive kind of your horizontal understanding of the business, and as you say, where kind of people are coming from. But was there a point where you started to see just your behavior alone started to, your curiosity, your sense of inquisitiveness, your willingness to kind of ask people and really understand where they're coming from, where it's others started to notice it and then started to kind of reach out and kind of grab you into their piece of the organization?
Absolutely. I would say that, as I've had those cross-functional relationships, it's very common, or has been very common in my career, that I've been asked to apply for a role or asked to think about a different position. Probably because of those relationships that I've built, as well as I would say, the way that I handle myself in those situations. And really thinking about things from everybody's different perspective versus just trying to get my specific piece done. So absolutely, it's definitely been helpful in my career building.
Mhm. Let's talk about business planning for a little bit. So, um, this phrase called business planning. Tell us a little bit about what the phrase means to you, and your experience with it.
From all those different roles, I do think that there is a different definition and a different structure depending on what role I was in, and what group I was working with. If I'm in my R&D hat, I'm thinking real long term, right? In my industry, that is 10 to 15 years. If I'm doing more in that M&A or competitive intelligence space, it's real quick, right? We're going to have to make those decisions really quick and not miss an opportunity that's going on in our market. So we're probably moving more in the 3 to 6 month space. But what's consistent across all those processes is really that collaboration across members to bring their specific expertise to the table and provide What are the right decisions we can make at the right time to get the expected outcome? So, really getting everybody aligned on here's where we want to go in the future, whether that's 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 10 years from now.
Mhm.
What are those pieces we have to pull together, and who has to be involved so that when we get to that endpoint, we've met that expectation or we've gotten that desired outcome.
I love how you talk about work influencing the meaning or the really kind of the horizon of
Mhm.
business planning, because you're right. If you are part of an M&A group, your horizon is not 3 to 5 years. You've got to make a recommendation within a period of X number of months. And so I love that piece about how horizons can change when it comes to business planning. You just need to know the group, the purpose of the group that you're in, and how what horizon is important to that unit. I also absolutely love it. I don't think that this was true when you and I first got to know each other, but every time I now hear you talk about business planning, it never occurs without you talking about getting the right people to the table to collaborate. And number two, you use the word making decisions over and over and over again.
Mhm.
So it's like this whole idea of business planning, it's really about getting people together to determine a sense of direction. Where are we going and why are we going there so that we can make the decisions along the way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Completely agree.
Um, do you have so as you think about this, a business planning process, regardless of the horizon, the time frame associated with it, do you have a framework that you use for the horizon with what you're working with? And what is it?
So I would say across the time frame or across my years of experience, I have been given templates, I have been given formats, I've been given things. As we all know, there's a corporate process that has to be consolidated and brought back together at some point. What I would say is true about all of those corporate processes is really trying to your point, getting everybody anchored on where are we going? When do we need to get there? What processes, tools, people need, what do we need to actually be able to achieve that? And how do we make sure we're all on the same page and we can bring our best to work every day? So I do use that structure. I know that Reg, you and I have talked about it before, but the vision, goals, roles, processes, relationships. If I have my team and we can sit down and we can all collectively agree on where are we headed, why is it important that we head there? We can start to pull apart, what are those processes that we need? What are the people that need to be involved? And how do we make sure that we are presenting ourselves in that collaborative network? Because again, we can never do anything by ourselves. In that collaborative network, in a way that's going to further our objective.
Mhm.
Bringing yourself best self to work every day is a way that we usually talk about that. So I can say I've definitely used that tool and that framework for whether it's my own personal team that I'm leading or whether it's a team I'm a part of, to kind of help us break
To
down what are
influence
those
them.
chunks of pieces. Yep.
Mhm. I heard you use the word where, when, what, and how.
Hmm.
So kind of four chunks. And I also heard you use the word, which you and I've talked, the words which you and I've talked a lot about, kind of goals, roles, processes, and relationships, which are highly linked to where, when, what, and how.
Hmm.
And then there might be more corporate-y kind of words that you use in relationship to those things, like strategic intent or business unit intelligence, midterm targeting work, and then short-term implementation. So one of my favorite experiences with you was working with you as a more novice leader. You weren't quite yet in what you call this kind of influential leader kind of lane, right? You were kind of learning the ropes, and something happened to you when the framework was given to you. And so for people that are kind of watching this today, you know, at Rejuvi, we believe that, again, you heard me say it at the opening part of this call, you can be compassionate human leaders at the same time as you are a fierce business leader. Now, what's happening behind the scenes is you have to unpack each of those things and you have to understand a growth model to enable it. So, if you want to be a compassionate human leader, you have to enable it and grow it through this human growth model. And at Rejuvi, we call that the Tower of Power, kind of see, no, do. And then that's very different from how we're going to help that compassionate human leader to run a fierce business. And that can be represented all different kinds of ways, where Emily's talking about where, when, what, or how, or we're talking about it, goals, roles, processes, and relationships. Our phrase for that is called the backward Z. So think about writing a Z backwards. And the reason we talk about it that way is because these two growth models, the growth model for the human and the growth model for the business, are related. And so there's certain things about the leader personally that are highly correlated, for example, to strategic intent and goals and where are we going. Now, when you first got a glimpse of like these two growth models, something happened to you. It like just clicked. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that experience when you had a chance as a leader to get information, to be trained, to get coaching on, wow, there's these two parts? Kind of what happened to you, Emily?
So I would say, as I think about that, like I describe myself as an accountant, as a finance background. I'm a very black and white, like I fill out this template, it kicks this thing out kind of person. So when I went through this training and Reg and I talked about this process, at first I was very skeptical, to be honest, right? I was like, if we just take this framework and I just sit down with my very technically minded like friends and colleagues, they're going to say, no, I need to know how A plus B equals C, right? Um, what was so instrumental about this framework and the way that I learned how to put it together was that A plus B does equal C. And actually, if we walk through each of these individual steps, we're going to come to that outcome that we were trying to achieve. And if we trust the process, which is also something I chant to myself a lot, trust the process, that outcome's going to get there and we're organically and together get to that end goal. So I have worked with multiple teams through this process, sitting them down, taking time out of our normal busy day, taking the time out of that month end close or whatever that might be to say, we're going to really focus on the big picture for a while. And where does our team fit within that big picture? And why does it make sense that that we are thinking about these different strategic objectives that are going to fit within that framework? And what are we going to think about what we're going to do this year versus the next 5 years? And then what are we going to think about processes? Like just walking them through the individual pieces where I would say in my own personal experience, leaders before have given me, here's your goals template, like go fill it out and come back and tell me what you're going to tactically get done this year. We start with that big picture first. So that
Mhm.
by the time we're getting down to those tactical goals, they just write themselves,
Mhm.
right? We now have a better understanding of where our company's going. We have a better understanding where our group is going to fit into that. We have a better understanding where are our big rocks, where do we really want to focus? And we can jot down those tactical goals. So whether I've had a group that I've gone into and thought they're going to hate this and they are going to, not have the patience to walk through this, or whether I go into a group that I feel like has, more of a desire, every time I do that, every time we take the time to do that, I get such complimentary feedback. Thank you for pausing. Thank you for bringing me to the big picture. I don't feel like I ever talk about this stuff. I feel like it is all about my to-do list and not about why. Why
Mhm.
are we doing these things?
Mhm.
So it really has transformed the way that I think about goal setting, the way that I think about business planning, and even the way I think just about leading my team. If I can't draw the line from that tactical thing that I need them to do all the way through those steps, then why are we doing that thing, right? It really helps you draw those lines around the big rocks and get people unified and motivated to move in the same direction.
Mhm. I have so many things I want to talk to you about because that was just really, really just um, really informative. But when you talk about so many times we have these tactical things that are in front of us, and we work with thousands and thousands of leaders, right? All the time. And one of the things that I would say is that leaders and their teams, they're kind of stuck downstream in this kind of tactical, here are our metrics to which we're held accountable, and they feel a sense of swirl and being stuck, and all these little parts and pieces of outcomes and KPIs that are kind of, just kind of in this swirling mix. I bet that's really fun watching my hand with the blurred screen. Anyway, um, I think that one of the things that is really then for me helps the team kind of start to find their sea legs is to explain that they're stuck in this outcome KPI metrics space where tactics are really important, and it can make them feel like they don't have their sea legs. So to get their sea legs, we're going to go upstream together, and we're going to start to think about more of a business planning framework, because the business planning framework starts to help them to understand, is all of this swirl, are all of these tactics, just like you said, the right things? Maybe they are and maybe they aren't. But that's kind of here what I'm saying. Just like the work that I do every day is helping leaders to help their teams get unstuck because they're downstream in these just the gargantuan KPI frameworks. I'm like, just look upstream. You're in a downstream moment, and that's understandable. But you got to get upstream to figure out whether or not all this stuff is right, you know?
100%. I would also say from what I've noticed when I talk to my teams about those tactical things, it is so easy to bring up, here's that roadblock that's in my way. I can't do this because my system doesn't do what I want to do, or this person has a different role or responsibility, or whatever that might be. Again, connecting it to, but the output that we're trying to get is this. So, how do I work around those constraints? Because no system is perfect, no role responsibility is perfect. How can we get around those constraints to still get to that end goal?
Mhm.
It just helps them think differently, right? And it helps reprioritize. Well, I just have to get here. So maybe I don't have to use this specific thing. Maybe I can work around it, or maybe I can leverage some work somebody else has done. And it also motivates them to, why do I need to do that?
Mhm.
Where is that output going to go, and what decision is going to be made because of it? And makes it important that we figure out a solution, that we keep working and we don't just let the roadblock stop us.
Mhm. Can you tell us a little bit about your first experience using this kind of four-step process as you talk about it, where, when, what, how, goals, roles, processes, relationships, or the backward Z? Can you talk about your first experience in using it? How, just what was the situation? And then how did it feel for you as a leader doing it the first time? And then what response did you get?
So this was way back when we first met, Reg. So back to just kind of my inexperience as a leader at that time. I was not even the leader of the group in which that I rolled this out. I had strong support from my leader. We had a team of about eight-ish people, kind of different geographies. And my leaders encouraged me to, I said, hey, I learned some new tools and tricks and I'd like to try them out. And he definitely gave me the leverage and the space to do that. Um, but it felt very uncomfortable for me to not have that leadership seat, but yet be the one who was trying to get everybody together and be thinking this way. So I felt a lot of interpretation about that. I did not want to be viewed by my peers as, trying to go above them or trying to take a role that I hadn't earned. But what I was so thankful for is, so first of all, I could start with, hey guys, like this is what we're going to try to do. This is what I'd like to try to achieve. And I did use the, hey, when we get to the goals session every year, you all sit down and try to figure out what you're going to write. I promise you, by the end of this 2 day session, you are going to know exactly what to write in that system. Like we are all going to be fully aligned. So I kind of gave them, here's the win that you personally are going to have by spending and investing this time with me. And then I did just say a couple times, I'm like, I know that you guys think that this is way upstream, right? We're going to start with company vision and mission. But I promise, trust the process. By the time we get to the end, it'll all pull together and make sense. And I, again, like I said, I had really good feedback. I had wonderful support from my leader. He was phenomenal. He actually ended the session with everybody signing a document that, here is our team's purpose statement. Here is our team's tactical
It's
things.
it's such a great it's such a great story.
Yeah.
It's such a great story. And I remember we had a lot of classes of iced tea when you were kind of going through that process. And I think what was significant is it's that whole thing around um, you know, stepping in. You may not have the formal leader title. I would also offer that organizations are asking more and more people to provide leadership. And so, even though you may not have been the formal director, you were a manager and you had an idea, right? And you had a method and you kind of gave it a whirl. And I thought it was so fantastic watching you go through that process because for you just from me watching you, it felt a little bit like you were taking a leap of faith. um but you were telling yourself, as long as I know the next one or two steps, it's
Mhm.
going to be okay. And so you would do all of your work on those one or two steps, and work that process, and then you were like, okay, now what are the next one or two things? It was a very leap of faithy, but do what you can do right now, manage, control what you can control, and don't worry about those end pieces right now.
Yep.
Really
I
fun to
do.
watch you go through that.
Yeah, I was going to say you did coach me through that quite a bit. I remember thinking specifically, like, oh, I don't know if this went well, or I don't know what this reaction was. And you're like, it's going to be okay. Like, just this is the process. We're going to spin a little bit and then we're going to come out the other side.
Yeah.
So, also allowing the space for the team to learn and grow and come back together on this is the alignment that
Mhm.
we all collectively
Mhm.
now think is the right path
Mhm.
was also greatly beneficial.
Do you think that there is, like, I love the way that you introduced yourself to the audience. Do you think that there is a relationship between the phrase that you use, influential leader, and your ability to collaborate on kind of the where, when, what, and how?
I do. Um, I think we've all had leaders that there are leaders because of the organizational chart. And then I think we've all had leaders that have nothing to do with our org chart, but we look up to and we follow and we trust their
Mhm.
recommendations.
Mhm.
So I've always tried to be the second of that, the latter of that. I don't think an organizational chart ever defines you as a leader. You have to earn it, and you have to earn that respect within the people that you work directly with and the people around you and your peers.
Mhm.
Um, so, yes, I think that influential leadership is not only required if you don't have direct boards, but required even more if you do.
Mhm.
You have to be able to work through that and earn that trust.
Yeah, so nice. Um, what advice would you have for other leaders who are just now starting to become fierce business leaders with a method? What advice would you have for them if it's, March And, or let me that's, well, it doesn't matter when it is, but they're off cycle from the corporate calendar.
Mhm.
So, let's assume that, the business that this leader who is wanting to give this whole, um, you know, fierce business leader process, they want to try, and they're on a calendar year, and here we sit in July. What
Mhm.
counsel would you have for them when they say, "Wow, this is not what my corporation uses. This is not what my business uses, kind of from a corporate process." And number two, it feels off cycle. So what counsel would you have for them?
Um, so I do think that first of all, the process itself is intentional, right? We need to carve out space and time. And I personally, in my own personal goals, give myself a big rock of being a leader and working with my team and doing team development. So it's so frequent that we go, well, we'll worry about that later when the time is allowed for it. I'm too busy today. Um, so think intentionally about when is the best time for you to have that time to reflect and to think about where do I want my team to go, or where do I personally want to go, or where is the business going? You cannot sit in your desk and personally write out every single goal and every single line item. That will not work. It has to be a collaborative process. But I do think you have to start with that initial sketch. So if goals aren't due until February, but you're sitting here in July and you're anxious and you think that you can get going on it or you want to give it a try, do it. Absolutely do it. Spend some intentional time. Block your calendar. This doesn't have to be a weekend. This absolutely can be during the day. Knowing where you're going and getting people rallied around that is just as critical as meeting whatever KPI you also have due that week. Once you have yourself kind of set, then it's carving out that time with your team. And like we said, it doesn't have to be this long 6 month process. This can happen over a week. This can happen over a short period of time. You can do the team settings. They don't have to be 2 full days. I've done 2 hours here and then follow up the next week with another 2 hours.
Mhm.
I've had teams in person. I've had teams virtually. Depending on that situation is the chunk of time you want to take out. But I always start those sessions with, guys, I can't sit at my desk and come up with these by myself. They will not be near as good unless we do them together. So let me walk you through where I've been so far, but then help me craft the rest.
Mhm.
Um, so I would say if you have energy and motivation and you can find that time for intent, start when you're able to start, and
Mhm.
it'll fit into the corporate process. And if something that Fred, you helped me learn too, is if you set those big rocks right, they're going to be the same for a couple years. It's
Mhm.
not necessarily going to change so dramatically that you have to start over completely in 6 months. Setting those big parameters right and getting that foundation set will just make those annual goals just come very naturally, very quickly.
Mhm. I think that that is such wise counsel. I think that so many people ask us around, well, what if this process is different than what, is the corporate, business
Mm-hmm.
planning,
Mm-hmm.
mega process? And what happens if I feel off cycle? Well, when some of the counsel that I give is get started now, because ultimately what you want to do is get yourself in a place where you are in front of how the corporate group is going to be communicating to you. So, for example, if you are in a calendar year, we all know that about August or September, you're going to be getting communication that says, hey, we'd like you to start thinking about and forecasting where you're going to be for a year end. And then when we think about the next year, so 2026, here are our pillars or our priorities for 2026. What we'd like you to do is to put goals together from your unit. And then we'd like you to build kind of a budget around it. So, really, what you're trying to do is if you know that that's kind of what is happening from a big picture kind of corporate perspective, What you want to do is get you and your team to a place where when those starts to come, when those start to come at you, you're not now jumping into the fray and starting to swirl around, how do I just put something together? No, you actually take this by intent, as you say, thoughtful piece of work that's been done, and now it can be communicated really quickly because you started, and it's just now a piece of how you actually do your work.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so we don't have too much time left, but one of the things that I heard you talk about was, sometimes you have to course correct, right? So, I also remember I think, um, having such a moment with this idea of how I think about myself as a leader and what I have to do personally to be the kind of leader I want to be is different than the steps I have to take to run my business. And for you, I think it was just like this, oh, like the seas parted because you were looking for a method. And I think so many leaders are. They just need to, they get feedback about themselves as a leader, but what they're really looking for is something that's going to give them traction. Right. And so I think that's something that happened. Now, so that was one of my first things the first thing I remember I think about you is the tea. The next thing is about how meaningful that was for you to have something that would create traction, for the people that you cared about, the people that you worked with every single day. And the third thing that I remember that that's just was like a light bulb for you was the idea of you use the backward Z, or you use goals, roles, processes, and relationships in a kind of upstream to downstream, right? Or in a forward motion way to plan, to build the business, but you use it in reverse to solve problems. So I want you to talk to the audience a little bit about what you learned in from going forward and backward, and how that's helped you to become this influential leader.
Absolutely. So I would say the first time I used it backwards was a very individual experience. But I had just learned the methodology. I think I had just rolled it out to my team. And I was on, a meeting call that I'm always on, something very natural. And I was with a group of people that I know relatively well. And it ended up in a big conflict. The topic at hand was a big conflict. And I would say even at one point, somebody looked over to me and said, "I don't know why we're yelling at you, but this is not working, right?" And I walked out of the room and I was, of course, emotional and I was frustrated. And I was like, I don't understand how that topic, which should have been pretty mundane, blew up the way it did.
Mhm.
And I sulked on it for a minute. And then I pulled out my materials and I took a look back at that process and started working it backwards. And my first one was to say relationships. I said, I know these people. I have a good working relationship with these people. I had no intrepidation going into this meeting. I actually talked to these people about the weekend on the way out of the meeting, not relationships. Went to processes. No, we did the processes right. I took a look at, where how this was going to work. I had already mapped that out. I had a plan for the process change that I wanted to implement. It was roles. And when I got to roles, I really clearly saw that I walked into that room assuming I had the role authority to make this process change. And the people at that table did not agree with me. They felt they had the role authority to, first of all, they should have brought the idea forward. They should be the ones making the authoritative decision. The fact that I was so far along on how we were going to implement was the conflict that we were struggling with.
Mhm.
So that was perfect, right? I could then I'd assessed where do we have our bottleneck, and I could approach it in that way. I could solve it that way. And that's how I went the next day to go ahead and solve it. And I have used that example with many of my team members. I have provided them, this specific verbiage to say, you guys are going to run into this. This is going to happen. And how can you just take your emotions out of it for a second, use this framework to think about it intellectually, and you can get yourself to where do I have my biggest bottleneck and how can I work through that? It gives you an approach to know where can I target. And I would say in my personal experience, relationships generally aren't it. Usually people get along with people or people come at it with the best of intents. I find that processes can absolutely get in our way and roles can absolutely get in our way.
Mhm.
If we have a vision problem or a goal problem, that's a significant issue.
Yeah.
But it's usually those first couple buckets that usually get caught up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that to me is again, it's one of the things that is so teachable. And you can prepare leaders because I think you and I use the phrase life comes at you.
Absolutely.
Leadership comes at you, and the way that it comes at you is through conflict, and so when you have this conflict, when leadership is coming at you, it's going to feel like it's a people issue. It's going to feel like it's an implementation issue. It's going to feel like, it's about relationships. And here's the thing. In almost all cases, it is not, right? And so you have to learn to diagnose in reverse. You build from goals, roles, processes, and relationships. I got to look to make sure I say it right. Right. You have to diagnose the other way, relationships to processes to roles to goals. And you don't, if you, and here's the thing, I think I've been, I'm in the human capital development and org development business. The number of times that I have been called by organizations to say, can you come in and to do some team building? And they want me to come in to do some conflict management skills. And I know in almost all cases that will provide no value. And I will tell them. And I think that just what you said, Emily, where you're talking about, people work with intent, right? We have good people trying to do the right thing. Usually what's happening is I'm going to hold up this model right here, and I don't know if I can. How do I get that to
You have to go in
show?
by your face, maybe.
Oh, that's right. Can you see
No,
it now?
no.
Is it clear? Okay, well, never mind. So yeah, that's the one part of having your blurry screen
Or,
up.
yeah, sorry.
But I think that for so long we have taught our leaders to be engaging leaders. And what engagement means is that you understand the big picture of the organization, and then you understand how to implement, how to execute against that. The days of being engaging leader and its usefulness are over. And if you want to, as you say, be an influencing leader, then you have to pick up these new ways of working. And they have everything to do with roles and process, or in backward Z language, business unit intelligence and short-term targeting. And if a leader is struggling today with conflict that's coming at them, almost in my experience, it almost always goes back to roles and process, or in other ways to say business unit intelligence and midterm targeting, because they are new ways of working for leaders, and we haven't taught them to be influencing leaders. We just taught them to be engaging leaders, and so they have no understanding of kind of how to help their teams to innovate and solve problems in those particular buckets. So there you go. Um, but I think that is, you know, is again, I think about these three major things when I think about Emily Heron and this amazing leader that you've become. I think about these kind of three moments, and it is all of the learning that took place, over something simple like iced tea, right? And you were so willing to learn the process, even though you love a good method, you love a good
Mhm.
T chart. I mean, you love a good equation, right? You love all those things. But you were willing to just you were so coachable and you were so willing to kind of sit back to find a way to be helpful, even in a situation where we might look to the director to say, wow, this is something that we want you to do. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is you clearly saw that there is sequence and there's method to running a business in a fierce way. There's method to it. And it's easy to explain and you just have to get started.
100%.
Yeah, and
Yes.
then I think the third thing that I always think about you is what a revelation it was for you to understand that that leader has to use this method in a forward motion kind of way to build to the future. But when leadership comes at you on a day-to-day basis and you're solving problems, you have to use it in reverse because it's going to come at you as a people issue, a short-term implementation issue, and the data would show and experience would show upstream things are causing these people problems. And if you don't want to keep having them, you've got to go upstream to fix the real story.
That is absolutely it, Reg. And I thank you for helping me get those templates and tactics and pieces to be able to
Oh,
have
for
all the
sure.
revelation.
Oh, my pleasure, for sure. So Emily, thank you so much for coming into Rejuvi 45 today to share your story about how to kind of make it quick as a leader of teams. I think that this is going to be great inspiration. For you to have talked about your 18 leaders and becoming a leader who is influencing as much as they are engaging. So thank you for that. For the audience, thank you for checking in today and also for watching our content on our channel and on our LinkedIn site, all those kind of social media things. We will be back together next week, and we are going to be covering a topic called Knowing is Squared. And that has everything to do with what Emily learned around, there's this difference between, oh, well, I can't quite show it myself as this compassionate human leader and kind of running a fierce business. So knowing is squared. That handle session will be handled as Q&A. So we'll see you next week on July 10th. Until then, have a wonderful Independence Day for those of you in the US, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.